Is it on? Wow. Aren't we lucky to have heard that original recording of a podcaster in 1521 plugging in his microphone and checking if it is on. Now, a lot of people didn't believe that microphones existed in 1540, but this recording is clearly proof that they did. Quite phenomenal. Hello there, and welcome back to the final couplet with me, Theo Cowan. Today we're looking at Sonnet 83. Now, a few sonnets ago I thought Shakespeare had gone off the topic of other poets and talking about all the other writers that are knocking about at the same time as him, and how he's maybe not the most modern of writers. But last episode and last sonnet proved that he was not over that topic, and he wanted to talk about it a little bit more. And I do believe that Sonnet 83 is, unfortunately for all of us, the same topic. But look, don't let that deter you, alright? There could be something in this that is going to blow your mind. And I, for one, find it quite interesting that he's so obsessed with talking about other poets and how they're also trying to write all these love poems. And of course, I know what you're all saying. You're all saying, look, Theo, these poems aren't real life. They're not Shakespeare's real life. He's not literally talking about himself as a writer and other poets. But where's your proof? Eh? So maybe he is. And where's this inspiration come from? He must have thought a lot about other poets. Otherwise he wouldn't be writing like this. That's my opinion anyway. Enough waffle. Let's take a listen to Sonnet 83. I never saw that you did painting need, and therefore to your fair no painting set. I found, or thought I found, you did exceed the barren tender of a poet's debt. And therefore have I slept in your report, that you yourself, being extant, well might show how far a modern quill doth come too short. Speaking of worth, what worth in you doth grow? This silence for my sin you did impute, which shall be most my glory, being dumb. For I impair not beauty, being mute, when others would give life and bring a tomb. There lives more life in one of your fair eyes than both your poets can in praise devise. So there we have it, Sonnet 83, and as I warned you, it is along the same sort of theme that we've had crop up in the last few sonnets. He is talking about other poets and comparing them to himself. And in many ways, it feels to me in this one, he's making some excuses as to why he hasn't used a certain writing style to describe his lover, and why he doesn't need to use this flowery, elaborate language to describe his muse. Right, let's break this one down line by line and work out what the hell Shakespeare was going on about in Sonnet 83. I never saw that you did painting need, and therefore to your fair no painting set. So I feel like he's using the word painting here, but I think what he's talking about is description and poetry in a way, but using painting as a sort of analogy potentially. So I think the essence of these first two lines is him saying, I never thought, or it never seemed apparent to me, that you needed to be so elaborately painted. So I never used flowery, elaborate language to describe your beauty. At least that's what I take from that, because he's not suddenly a painter, is he, Shakespeare? All right, he's only ever talked about writing, and if he's suddenly an incredible painter, then well, so be it. Respect to you. But I think he's using painting here to sort of, paint an image. Someone paints an image with words. I think that's what he's talking about. I found, or thought I found, you did exceed the barren tender of a poet's debt. So here he's saying, I could see, or thought I could see, that you were way better than any poet's praise. I like how he interjects himself, saying, I found, or thought I found. I don't know if you need to put that, to be honest, Shakespeare. It feels like a bit of a filler. And therefore have I slept in your report, that you yourself, being extant, well might show how far a modern quill doth come too short. Speaking of worth, what worth in you doth grow. Now that's quite a big section, but I think what he's saying here is, therefore, because I could see that you were way better than any poets could praise you for, I haven't actually put any effort into describing you, alright? But there, I had to say it. So that you, yourself, because you're still alive, can show people how amazing you are without the use of my writing. Look, you're right there. You can just show yourself to everyone, and everyone's going to be like, bloody hell, that bloke is amazing. That's the truth of it. I don't need to read a book to see how amazing that person is. He's right in front of me. Don't need to read these elaborate poems. He's right there. And that's the best description of all. This silence for my sin you did impute, which shall be most my glory, being dumb. So this, he's saying, you decided that this silence from me was my fault and a problem, but I'm actually really pleased with my dumbness, with my lack of speaking up, with my lack of writing potentially. So there's obviously been some sort of rift between the two that we don't know about, that's happened in between the poems maybe. And he's saying, look, you thought the fact that I wasn't writing about you was a bit shit. But actually, I think I've done a bloody good job not writing about you, because as I explained earlier, people just need to look at you to see how amazing you are. They don't need my writing. And this section to me feels a little bit sort of like a school kid explaining why he didn't do his homework. He's saying, Miss, I didn't write the essay about how amazing flowers are, because you just need to have a look at them and then you see, oh yeah, they are amazing. You don't need my writing, do you? Feels like a bit of a cop-out. Anyway, as usual, who am I to judge? I'm just a little old guy in 2024, whereas this is William Shakespeare we're talking about. He obviously knew what he was doing. For I impair not beauty, being mute, when others would give life and bring a tomb. So here he's bringing the topic of other writers back in, and he's starting by saying, look, by remaining silent, I actually don't impair your beauty at all. Whereas other writers, trying to bring you to life and bring your beauty to life, they're actually, dare I say it, killing you instead. They're bringing a tomb to you. So think about that. A real burn on other writers, isn't it, that one? Take that. And now, of course, we're on to the final couplet. There lives more life in one of your fair eyes than both your poets can in praise devise. Now this, yeah, I like this as a final couplet. Good to have a good old rhyme, eyes devise. That's a classic. And he's saying, you have more life in one of your beautiful eyes, not even both, than all of these other bloody poets could invent, devise, in their praise for you. So that's it. Sonnet 83 broken down. And I feel like he's saying, look, I almost can't write about you because you're right there. Look, forget about all the other 82 sonnets that I've done, because look, I have done 82 other sonnets, and yeah, you have read them all, and I have talked about your beauty, and I've tried to describe you. So just forget that for a second. We're starting from scratch here, and I'm saying I can't describe you, all right? And that's why I've been so silent. And all these other writers have given it a good go, but actually, it's rubbish. And in trying desperately to describe how amazing you are, they're killing you off. So I think the best course of action is to just let everyone have a look at you, see how amazing you are, and no writing needed. However, in doing that and saying that, I have written a sonnet about it. So it's a bit contradictory, isn't it? And spoiler alert, there's another 85 sonnets to come. And I imagine they will also be about how beautiful this person is. So I don't know about this one, Shakespeare. I think you're saying you remain silent, but where's the action of remaining silent? I certainly can't see it. You've written 82 sonnets so far about this person, and you've got loads more to come. That, in my eyes, is not silence. If anything, it's too many sonnets. Right then, I think it's probably about time we put this to our story. And if you remember last week, Shakespeare challenged Ben Jonson to a sort of poet slam, a poet-off, in the town square of London. Crowds turned up, and each of them read one sonnet to try and get the attention and love and admiration of Christopher Marlowe, of course. Ben Jonson's sonnet went down very, very well, and a hell of a sonnet it was too. Now let's see how Shakespeare's Sonnet 82 went down with the crowd and Christopher Marlowe, and how Sonnet 83 fits into all of this. Shakespeare finishes reading Sonnet 82 to Christopher Marlowe and the waiting crowd. A silence descends. Someone at the back of the crowd shouts, "Boring! That was boring! We want more of Ben Jonson's cool, interesting, new wave, modern writing." And another person shouts, "Yeah, I agree." Shakespeare turns to Christopher Marlowe and says, "Well, what did you think?" Christopher Marlowe says, "Shakespeare, your writing is old school, and there's a time and place for that. And look, a lot of people still love it, but for me, I gotta say, I love this new wave writing that Ben Jonson and some other poets are cooking up at the moment. I think it's cool. I think it's rock and roll." Shakespeare says, "I can't believe it. You've always loved my poetry, haven't you?" Christopher Marlowe says, "Well, yeah, I suppose I sort of have. Yeah, I've quite liked it." And Shakespeare says, "Well, this is me, this is my writing. If you can't accept that, then maybe we're not to be." And with that, he runs home with tears in his eyes. The crowd boo him as he runs off stage. "Boo, that was rubbish. We want more Ben Jonson. We want more Ben Jonson. We want more Ben Jonson." And Ben Jonson, hearing his name chanted, returns to the stage and performs another little ditty for them. They love it. Christopher Marlowe looks at Shakespeare running off into the distance and thinks, have I let the love of my life get away? Well, it is Shakespeare, and I'm sure he'll keep writing me sonnets and sending them to me, and maybe he'll win me over with them. And maybe he can adapt to the times and create some more modern writing. I'll let some time pass, and maybe he can win me over. Ben Jonson, meanwhile, sweeps Christopher Marlowe up into his arms and carries him off home, kissing and hugging him as they walk. Some weeks go by. Shakespeare has been desperately trying to write another sonnet for Christopher Marlowe to win him back. He was so upset after the poetry slam in the town centre. He couldn't believe that Christopher Marlowe chose Ben Jonson over him, and that the whole crowd hated his poetry. It's honestly the first time he's ever had that. Usually crowds love his work. He sat amongst hundreds and hundreds of crumpled up bits of paper where he'd attempted to write about Christopher Marlowe's beauty, but he just couldn't describe him. 2 more months went by, and Shakespeare still had not produced a sonnet. He thought to himself, well, look, there is no way that this man can be described. His beauty is beyond description. Let these other poets try and write about how hot he is. Go on, give it a go, but it's not bloody possible. He's too amazing for any poet or writer to describe. Late that night, Shakespeare heard a rat-a-tat-tat on his door. He went downstairs and said, "Who is it?" There was a pause, and then Christopher Marlowe's voice. "Shakespeare? Shakespeare, is that you?" Shakespeare says, "Yes. Well, I didn't expect to hear from you. Come in, I guess." He opened the door and Christopher Marlowe hurried on through. Shakespeare said, "Do you want a tea or coffee or something like that?" Christopher Marlowe says, "No." "Look, Shakespeare, what the hell's going on? Where's your sonnets? You always write me sonnets. What's happened?" And Shakespeare said, "Are you kidding me? You literally said that you preferred Ben Jonson's poems over mine. So obviously I've come back here and I haven't written any poems about you." And Christopher Marlowe says, "Well, I only did that to try and get you to write better poems. I mean, it was just a sort of way of encouraging you and making you write better." Shakespeare said, "Well, that's actually quite cruel, to be honest, Chris. I don't see why I should keep writing about you. I don't see why I should keep producing poems that you hate." And Christopher Marlowe says, "You know what, if you had kept sending me poems, maybe, just maybe, I would have loved you. I would have reciprocated the love you have for me." And Shakespeare said, "Well, it's too late to tell me that now, isn't it?" Christopher Marlowe slams his fist on the kitchen table and says, "Shakespeare, get it into your head. You could have won me over. But you didn't. You were too lazy to write another bloody sonnet. And now I'm going to go home to Ben Jonson and have sex with him. Unlucky Shakespeare." And with that, he picks up his cloak and storms out of the house. Shakespeare honestly couldn't believe what he'd heard. But suddenly inspiration came to him. He hadn't written for months, but he picked up his pen and he scrawled as quickly as he could. He had to get down his thoughts as to why he hadn't written sonnets to Christopher Marlowe. It wasn't because he was jealous. It was because Christopher Marlowe's beauty couldn't be put into words, and it was a waste of paper and ink to do so. He wrote Sonnet 83 in a matter of seconds and ran out of the door after Christopher Marlowe. He ran and was sweating profusely. Eventually caught up with Marlowe and said, "Marlowe, I've written a sonnet. It explains everything. Can I read it to you?" And Marlowe says, "Well, Shakespeare, I think it might be too late." And Shakespeare grabs Marlowe by the scruff of the neck and says, "Listen to this." He produces Sonnet 83 from his back pocket, and whilst still holding Christopher Marlowe by the collar up against a wall, he reads Sonnet 83. "I never thought that you needed to be elaborately painted. So I never used flowery language to describe your beauty. I could see, or thought I could see, that you were way better than any poet's praise. Therefore, I haven't put any effort into describing you, so that you yourself, being still alive, can show people how amazing you are without the use of my shit writing. You thought my silence was a bad thing, but actually I'm proud of my silence. because by being silent I don't detract from your beauty, whereas other writers try desperately to bring your image to life, and in doing so, kill you. There is more life in one of your beautiful eyes than all your poets can devise by praising you. So there we have it, Sonnet 83, and Shakespeare really plucked out some courage there, didn't he, to read that to Christopher Marlowe, even though he did get a little bit violent towards the end. And I was worried that Christopher Marlowe would maybe try and kick back or punch him or something like that, but it seems like he listened. Join me next week for Sonnet 84 and to indeed hear how Sonnet 83 went down with Christopher Marlowe. Until then, bye.